Welcome to One-Weighted Machines and the B7 Audi RS4 series. We're going to do some more cleaning on these three ports before we go to push the car and do the second set of valves. In one of the previous videos, I mentioned that we will not be buying new gaskets this time. These gaskets here are the ones that came out of the car. They had a ton of carbon all in here, everywhere. And I didn't use any solvents, no brake cleaner, nothing else to clean them. I just took a microfiber towel and I gently went around the gasket material, and all of the carbon was soft enough that it came off. So these are clean, and we're gonna do an experiment and reuse them this time on the car. Okay, so here's a decent look at the valves before we go to push the car. For the next part, we're going to lift up the bed sheets and set them over the engine bay so that we can push the car forward. Remember that if you open the driver's door, it'll prime the low pressure fuel pump and you'll get fuel going everywhere in the engine bay. So you're going to open the passenger door in order to put the parking brake down. Now we've got the bed sheets tucked away. If you look right in front of the Audi emblem on the grille, you'll see that it's very black right there. The first time around when I use these bed sheets, I use them in the same orientation, and that's mostly from spraying brake cleaner into the valley there because there was a lot of sand and I got some carbon in there, and that stuff dripped from under the car onto the bed sheet. So don't think you're going to get that much carbon coming out of the top, but if you have some rare instance like what I had to deal with last time, you are going to get brake clean and other chemicals on the floor, and your bed sheet will most likely pick them up. Now, as you can see here, I've got a small paving brick, interlock stone brick, that we're going to put in front of the tires so that when we go to push the car, it's going to stop the car because the e-brake's going to have to be off for this. Things to note when you're doing this. We'll grab a measuring tape and I'll go over it a couple times, but it's just kind of like a feel thing as to how far you're going to put the rock. Just so I can possibly help you guys do this a little bit easier on your own. Like I said, with the rock, it's more of a feel thing. Just put it a little forward and back. You're going to put the car in 6th gear and you're going to push it forward. When you push it forward, the rock will stop it. Then you go back, you check to see if the second set of valves has been closed. We'll try to get a measurement here, but depending on whether you're on 3 or 5 valves the first time, this might be slightly different. So we'll try to get you a measurement. Right now, we're 13 inches down from the center of the wheel. So take the center cap, draw a line straight down. The rock begins at 13 inches away from there. The next thing you want to do is remove the tape from the open ports so that you can have a good visual when you start pushing the car, maybe once or twice, to see if the valves are all closed. The more gentle you are with the tape, the less residue it's going to leave. This stuff does clean up pretty easily with your fingernail afterwards, but just take it off more gently to make it easier on yourself afterwards. Now with an interlock stone on either wheel on the front, we're going to push the car while it's in 6th gear, and come back out and then monitor the valves. At this point, I want to go over pushing the car. There are different ways you can do it. Some people will slide their hand onto the actual tire at the top and then push the car like that. I don't like that method because you can get a lot of sand and dirt and silt on your gloves. And some cars, like mine, is very lowered and you can barely get your hand in there without scraping your knuckles. The other method is to use the A-pillar to push it. Again, when you're in the middle of a job like this, your own hands, whether you take your gloves off or not, you could contaminate the headliner material that's on the A-pillar. Better not to do that. Same thing with the paint work. You don't want to push it from the paint work. You can leave scratches in the clear coat. So your gloves are already dirty and most wheels have some brake dust on them. You can use a towel just to wipe off one spoke, no matter what type of rims that you have, and then putting your hands in this orientation and squatting down, facing the rear of the car, you use the wheel to push the car forward. Okay guys, so 13 inches was not enough. It did not close the second set of valves. We're going to move the rock slightly further forward. I would say I'll move it forward from the original position. I haven't touched the measuring tape. We'll move it up to 16 inches from where the center line cap was when we started. Okay, so the measuring tape hasn't moved since we've started. Let's leave it in 6th and see what happens. If this doesn't work, we're going to put it into 5th gear and see what happens. I'm not 100% sure if I use 6th or 5th gear the first time around. Okay guys, so moving it 16 inches from the initial point that our measuring tape was, still has not closed the valves. There is more movement on the valves suggesting that we're almost there. So just because we started with 6th gear, we're going to continue this with 6th gear. We only really get one shot at this. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move it forward now to 19 inches and we're going to go give the car one more push. Again, as you can see, the measuring tape is still in its original position that we started off at. I'm just going to slide the rock back now to 19 inches away from our original position. Again, we've made more progress, yet there's still more needed to close one of the sets of the valves. Let's go to 21 inches from the original starting position now. Still not enough. Let's go to 23 inches. We are almost there on closing the one set of valves that's not closing yet. So we're going to start going incrementally by inches. We're going to go to 24 inches now. 24 was not enough. Let's jump to 26. Okay guys, so the final number to get the second set of valves closed was 26 inches, starting from where the car originally was, down from the center cap. So run your measuring tape down from the center cap to the floor, then measure 26 inches up, 26 inches at the start of your interlock paver brick, and your car should close the second set of valves. I don't think it'll make any difference if you are on 3 or 5 to begin with. It should all be the same. This was all done with the car in 6th gear and the e-brake down. Here's a look inside the engine bay after we've done the push. So as you can see, all the clean valves are now open and one of our dirty valves at the front here is closed. This one is closed and the one at the back is closed. So next we're going to tape off the valves that we've already cleaned and move on to working on the other 3. In terms of garage space, if you guys will remember in part 1, I started off leaving the car 3 feet away from the garage door. Right now, measuring from the garage door to the front of where the license plate cover would be, is about 20 inches, so there's still a lot of room left to work. So I would advise 3 feet because I still have a comfortable amount of space in between the garage door and the car to continue working. Drop the bed sheets back down and tape off the ports you previously cleaned. If you previously cleaned 5, tape off 5. If you did 3, do 3. Now we've got the 5 ports we just cleaned closed. Make sure to tape off all 5 ports. Probably 2 of them are going to be fully closed. Still take the time and put the tape on because you don't want any carbon flying out from underneath your towel and going into the other set. Then you'll have to do more cleaning and it's over. You're not pushing this car anymore. Those valves aren't getting any more cleaner. This tuck tape is annoying to work with sometimes. It's very sticky, sticks to your hands. If your roll starts to get all messed up, it's a pain to reset it. But trust me, the headache of using the tuck tape is worth it. It's the best kind of tape that goes around every single metal edge and gives you the most protection for what you're doing. Now I'm going to get to work cleaning the second set of valves. I'm not going to film this because you guys have seen more than enough of the process with the picks and the steel wire brushes and the air compressor during the first set. We'll just do a final video of what it looks like when they're all clean, and then we'll continue from there. Just to make things a bit easier, it's a lot of stuff for me to remember from last time, so I think I might have mixed it up and I said that using the picks is the best way to start this out. It isn't. Using your larger steel wire brush has been what I've kind of gone to right away to start the ports. Then after that, I've gone to the medium-sized one, and afterwards, I've used my assortment of picks once I've cleaned it out with the air compressor once and I can see better where the small spots are that there's still carbon built up. The only thing that I will remember from last time and tell you that most likely will be different on your car than mine is that you will be using the very small one at the beginning if you don't know when the last time your carbon clean was done, and you're going to throw away a bunch of these because they're going to clump up and pick up a lot of carbon. Luckily for you guys, this one was sitting on the yard waste bag, and like I said earlier, if you store these, say on your engine bay or somewhere, because you're going to have towels, you're going to have a tendency to say, oh, it's soaking some fluid, let me just put it on there. This is what happens. Okay, this was on the bottom. I haven't used this one. It's brand new. It just sticks to it, and it's a pain to get them off of there. So it's better that you guys saw it like this. So if it's your first time in unknown, you're going to clump these up. That's still going to happen. If not, or when you advance your cleaning, you go to the really big one and then the medium-sized one. In the previous frame, my camera was zoomed in too far. So this is the medium one, that's the large one, and this is the very small one that you're going to clump up if it's your first time and throw away a bunch of them. And see how it holds onto the microfiber towel, just so you guys have a better visual of it. Okay guys, just another tip. I'm not sure what I had said earlier in the series, but if you're working on a port this way and you're using your phone as a flashlight, this is after you've done steel wire brushing and you've just got a little bit of chemical left as residue in there, and you're using visually with your pick in order to get off the spots that you didn't get with the steel wire brush. Say if you're working on the driver's side bank, you want to hold your phone or your flashlight in your right hand. It's a bit counterintuitive, but the angles inside of there are very odd. You'd think that holding your light in this hand and putting the pick in your other hand would be easier, but now that I'm doing it again, holding the flashlight in your right hand, say on this bank, and using the pick on this one gives you the most ability to shine light and see what you're doing. It'd most likely be vice versa on the other bank. Another advancement on technique and timing, because you want to save as much time as possible in any task that you do. In the previous part, you'll remember I recommended not to do 3 ports at the same time. Do one, focus on it, because it takes a lot of focus and rounds with the picks and the wire brushes in order to get it very clean. What I tried this time, and it seems to be working better, is I filled all 3 ports with the brake cleaner, and I used the steel wire brushes to get the basic bits off. Like I said, it comes off quite fast, the larger bits, on all 3 ports. But what I did afterwards was I didn't use compressed air to blow out the 2 at the back. I chose this as my port to work on, and This is the only one that I used compressed air and a rag to blow out. Then I came back, I filled it up, and I kept going with the picks and the wire brushes. I left the other two to soak. The only thing that I did do is every time I would come back here with the wire brush, I'd give each one of those two a good 20 to 30 seconds with the wire brush, not caring though what's going on in there, how much is being broken up, how much is not. Whatever's happening with that fluid and the bit of wire brushes is going to advance it, and you're not going to give too much attention to them. Because like I said, the amount of attention you have to give to one port to get it completely clean is a lot. So leaving those two soaked and just giving them a little bit of attention in the middle of the way is the more efficient route to go. Still do focus on finishing one port completely clean at a time. Okay guys, some more as we work tips here. This is the second round of towels that we've been using. I threw away the first yard waste bag with the first set of towels because it really stinks up the garage. Next is the steel wire brushes. So these two that you see here, this car has been carbon cleaned once previously. I used these two brushes the first time, and these are the same ones that I've used this time. They were fine on the first 5 ports that I did. This one is still fine. It hasn't shed any bristles. This one has now shed 2 bristles that I've caught when I've been working, and it's not worth risking, okay? Because these things fall in there, they can score your cylinders, whatnot in there. Not worth it, okay? So if you get in there, stay focused. I mean, this particular wire brush has now done, say what, 13 cylinders of duty. So if I were to do this again, I'd just use a brand new one every single time. I wouldn't try to use the old ones. I just didn't want to open the new package, but now I have. So this did shed 2 bristles. I caught them, but yeah. So we're going to start using the new one from here on in. Just know that there is a duty cycle even for the heavy duty steel wire brushes. After a lot of work off camera, the ports are almost all clean. The one thing that I want to make sure to share with you guys is that the measurement I gave you when we pushed the car is accurate. Last time I didn't have any issue like this, but this time one of the ports, as the valves were closing, visual inspection showed that they were completely closed. But then when I went and did a small chemical test and put some chemical, once the bubbles had left from the actual brake cleaner, the chemical bubbles, there was just a slight hissing sound, and that was some chemical getting by maybe the pinhole, very millimetric opening left in one of the valve sets. So off camera I had to go and push the car maybe another, I don't know, probably half to 3/4 of an inch, something you could barely even perceive. But if you do have one set of valves, which you will, that is quite open, and it's the one that you keep pushing the car in order to wait until it closes, do push it, do a little chemical test before you break up any carbon with the brush. Nothing's going to happen with a little bit of brake clean getting into the engine. And then push it just a tad bit more until the valves are fully closed, and then get to work. And you only need to focus on the one valve that was very, very open and that you've had trouble with the small pushes getting it to close. So you will get them all closed, and you'll get to work and you'll be fine. Okay guys, now we've got the second set cleaned up. Ready now for reinstall. This is the second set of towels before I throw them away. My towels aren't very carboned up. As I said, this car didn't have severe buildup, but getting the smaller amounts out still took a long time. So all the towels you see on the ground there are saturated. If it's your first time, your pile of towels is all going to be blacked out with carbon. And this stuff on the floor, this is from a 2-stroke exhaust leak. It's not carbon buildup. We'll deal with repacking the exhaust maybe on this thing later, but I don't mind this thing leaking a bit of oil. Alright, so before we get to cleaning up the intake manifold side, let's just go over what we used for the engine side to clean everything. It ended up being 7 cans of brake cleaner here for the engine side, Our spray bottle's pretty much empty, so say about 2 more, so 9 bottles once we do the intake manifold side. So even for a very light job, you still will use 9 cans. Get 15 to 20 if it's your first time and you don't know if you're going the spray can route. What else on the table? The microfiber towels. We use 3 packages. I think there's one left with about 6 there. So for a light cleaning, we used 12, 24. We still used about 30 microfiber towels. They weren't all blacked out with carbon. It was probably only like 10 or 12 of them that were. But when you go in there for the secondary 3, 4, 5th rounds with the picks to clean, you're still going to have tons of chemical inside there. And that's going to saturate the towel and you're going to throw it away. They smell, you can't reuse them. So this is where we're at with this. All we're going to do is put 2 more cans inside of our spray bottle and then we're going to get to work on the intake manifold. When it comes to the intake manifold, the first thing I recommend if you haven't is watch the intake manifold video I made. There's a lot of information on this there. And the other thing is this cleaning portion that we're going to do it in a specific way that I show here. The buildup is very light on this manifold because it's been deflapped and it's only been 2,000 kilometers. But if it's your first time, you most likely are inside of the walls here going to have a lot of carbon buildup, and we'll show you how to get rid of that. If you still have your intake manifold flaps in place, this will be a little bit more difficult. So if you're doing the deflap, do your deflap first and then get to the part where you clean these up. And I do recommend doing the deflap as there are stories on the forums of people with picture evidence showing that sometimes these flaps actually break off, fall into your engine, and you trash the motor. You can't find motors easily for this car, so any bit of maintenance that you can do is going to go a long way. Just taking these out could save you. I can't see anyone finding a motor for one of these for less than 10 grand nowadays. So, and even if you do, you're lucky to find a used one at that. So I know it's a bit difficult for some people to want to take the step to do the deflap, but do it. In order to clean the inside walls of the intake manifold, we are going to keep it upside down, flipping it the other way and putting it over the table, and maybe putting a catch can like an oil pan underneath, spraying brake cleaner, and using the wire brush is not a good idea because no matter how you put it on blocks or anything, those vacuum actuators or the arms are going to have pressure on them, and that's not something you want to mess around with. Those are expensive components. And the buildup that will be inside here will be much more than this intake manifold on yours. Is something that's more grimy. It seems like more PCV oils. And what we're going to do is just use some brake cleaner, spray it in here, and use a towel and gently take it out. It's much better to do this if your manifold is deflapped. It might be almost very difficult to do if you have the flaps in there. This cleaning method did get a decent amount of the grime buildup out. The last time I flipped this upside down on the side of the work table and I used a steel wire brush. There was much heavier buildup in here, but like I said, that was a mistake. That could have broken the vacuum actuators or the arms. I don't recommend you do that. If you are doing this and you have heavy buildup, I remember even back then the steel wire brush was not that necessary. The stuff inside here was much softer and more grimy than the stuff that's in the engine. That stuff gets a lot harder and it was more difficult to get out. So even if you are doing it your first time and you see a ton of buildup in here, once you've deflapped, do the same thing, spray down a bunch of towels and get in there and then gently pick it up. Just don't let it get too saturated, because if it gets too saturated then it's not going to pick stuff up it's going to break it up and it's going to fall into the manifold. So make sure you're always working with a clean section of towel. Get a good amount of brake cleaner on it, pull it up, inspect it, do the same thing, go around all of them. This project isn't too complex in terms of mechanics, but it is in terms of how many steps there are in order to do the process. So one thing that shouldn't skip your mind is if you're working in your garage, have a garbage can with a cap. As you can see, the yard waste bags, the brake cleaner, all of the saturated towels, it's a lot of garbage and this stuff stinks. So even if you take a break and you come and you go, if you're working in colder temperatures and your garage is closed, this stuff just sitting on the floor of your garage is going to keep the whole place stunk up. So you want to throw them away once every couple hours after you're doing stuff and have a lid on your garbage can so that the smell doesn't come out. At this point, we're ready to begin the reinstall procedure. There's a lot of stuff going on. So clean up your area, take all the bed sheets off the car, put all your tools away that were for cleaning, and get back in the zone you were in part 1, which is actually putting the motor back together. If you use the tuck tape, you're going to have to peel it off and then go around the edges of the ports with your fingernail if there's some small residue and take them off. If it's further out, don't worry about it too much. The main thing that you need to do is focus on where the orange material on the gasket mates with the engine there. Back over at the work table before reinstall, the only new tool that we have is our torque wrench because we're going to torque things to spec. The most important things that we are going to make sure we get to torque spec are the intake manifold bolts and the throttle body bolts. These gaskets are all sources of potential vacuum leaks, and if you go with hand tight, even though these are low torque specs, just the slightest motion over time can possibly back out one of the screws just a tad bit, causing a vacuum leak. You don't want that. We're going to do it in the proper star pattern and we're going to use a torque wrench. The throttle body, if it's your first time opening it up, you're most likely going to have a lot of grime inside here. This one I cleaned up last time. It did not build any grime in the past 2,000 kilometers. So we're just going to put it back. In future videos, we are going to open up this throttle body in an attempt to clean the throttle position sensor. It's a common thing for B7 RS4s to have faulty throttle position sensors. Most people just get replacement throttle bodies. We're going to use my car as an experiment, and we are going to open up these bolts, do some research, and try to clean that with some electrical contact cleaner and put it back on the car. The goal here, though, I'm going to do a lot more work removing the manifold many times on this car because we want to be able to isolate things and see if they truly did work. So we're not going to open up the throttle body right now. It's just going to go back on the car. It's going to throw its intermittent TPS codes. That's fine. We just want to make sure that nothing was wrong with the carbon clean process. We'll rule that out, and then we'll do another video removing the throttle body again, and we're going to go inside there and take a look. The only reason that there is a chance for this throttle body to be saved, or any of these throttle bodies, is that in general other cars, especially this one, like I said, it did have grime around this shaft here, and that small opening there could possibly allow a little bit of grime to get into the actual electronic side of the throttle body. This is completely unknown. We're going to try it out, but that's the thinking behind the low chance that this throttle body can be saved. At this point, I've removed all of the tape from the engine side. We are also going to remove all the tape on the intake manifold, tighten any clamps if you've loosened them, and take the tape off of your fuel pumps, all of your lines, everything here. The only one that I say do not take the tape off of is the 90-degree arm that goes into the PCV box, because to remember the orientation, if you'll remember in a previous part, I said that there is a difference in this 90-degree arm. The side you taped off is the side that doesn't go into the PCV box. It goes into the breather hose. So take this piece off right at the very end when you're about to install it. All the other tape in this project can pretty much come off now. So as I was taking the tape off, this is the end of the breather hose that goes into the PCV box. So before the PCV box does anything and sends this stuff back into the intake manifold, This is prior to the 90-degree arm that goes in. What I found stuck to the wall were these small chunks of carbon, which in trying to figure out if it's valve overlap or the PCV or other sources that cause carbon buildup, it's more likely becoming a combination of many factors. Because having something this hard, looks even hard, feels even harder than the carbon that is on the intake valves, and this is before the PCV box. So the oil vapors themselves, however they accumulate and get into the breather hoses from the valve covers, there is a carbon being built up even before it goes into the PCV box. So that's just something that you guys might want to see. Here's another look at the intake valves before we start the reinstall process. They're all cleaned up and ready to go. Okay guys, back here at the tape removal process. We are taking everything off. The high pressure fuel pumps have really small holes inside there. You can take that tape off while you're starting to do your reassemble. The only two that I would say don't do, because you actually do have a chance of possibly dropping a fuel clip or a bolt in there while you're doing other things, and because it's one of the last pieces that goes back on, is the tape on your PCV breather lines that go across the top from both banks into the PCV box. That's a pretty big hole, and if you drop something in there, that's going in there. You're gonna have to take the valve cover off and whatnot to possibly find something, so not worth it. Take every other piece of tape off except for those two, because if in the slight chance you drop something in there, you're gonna have a bad day. Now that we're getting ready to begin the reinstall, I want to go over one of the most important things here, which is you want to be working in a relatively quiet environment, because there's a lot of things you need to focus on when you're reinstalling. And the one thing that I would say you really want to focus on is with all of your electrical connectors and vacuum line clips, you want to hear audible clicks. Okay, so be listening carefully, make sure they click in, gently tug on them a little bit to make sure that the tabs have seated, because one vacuum line that you don't plug in can cause an EPC light and everything, and your car can think that there's something wrong, and you're going to be frustrated and you're going to have to come back in here, do a smoke test and whatnot. Same with the electronic connectors. You want to hear audible clicks. Move air intake flex tube gently out of the way, minding the vacuum line underneath, to make way for replacing the intake manifold. Do a survey of your connectors again and make sure that you can access them once the manifold's in, and put the manifold back on. Before putting the intake manifold back on, make sure that the mating surfaces for the gaskets are all cleaned along the especially orange O-ring material area. You want to take your gloves off, use the oils on your fingers, pick up any debris that might be there, use a cloth, towel, fingernail. Brake clean maybe if it's very light, okay? Because if you put too much and you break up too much debris, it could go past the valves that are open. So try to stay away from that. Be very gentle in this spot. Once you've done that, once you made sure your mating surfaces are clean, you've obviously done it on the intake manifold, grab your new gaskets, okay? They have guide tabs. Make sure they're oriented in the proper way, and make sure you press them into their holes and put them in their place, and then come and put the intake manifold on, being careful not to jostle things too much. But these gaskets have tabs, so they will stay in their place. Put intake manifold back in the reverse of the manner you took it out. So slide it in on its side from the driver's side, slide it downwards towards the passenger side, and set it into place while minding your electrical connectors and fuel lines and everything else. Make sure the banjo bolt fitting for both fuel lines is accessible, as I put the manifold on and it's still down there, so I have to take it back out and make sure that that's slid out. Okay guys, so right now we're looking at the inlet part of the inlet manifold. So we went over the importance of the banjo bolts and that they're exposed before we tighten any bolts. The other things you want to make sure is this flimsy electrical line here that comes and clips into your fuel lines here has a potential to snag underneath the PCV inlet part of the intake manifold. That happened to me right now. Say I would have just left that down there, tightened all the bolts, started reinstalling stuff. Then when you come to plug this in, you're going to have to go all the way back and disassemble all that stuff. So with where this was, I left the intake manifold in. I just had to lift it up a couple inches to slide it slightly out from under there and free it up. You want to do this before, you want to survey this before this is all torqued down. The other thing that you want to pay attention to is this vacuum line back here. You want to gently put it underneath the PCV box, okay? You might have moved it out of the way, but you want to put it back down there now so that you can secure those 3 bolts again. Inside of the PCV box, there's a bracket that holds the evap purge line. If you've done the bypass, which you most likely have, you have very tight space here and you're just going to have your coolant line coming out and you're going to have your evap line still, which originally took up all this space. Look at how far away the old coolant pipe is here. Now you're running it from underneath. So your evap line is not going to clip into your PCV anymore. Don't try to force it in there. This coolant line now is going to take up this space because I'm not going to put too much pressure on this so I don't break it, but this is going to come into here now. Move vacuum line contraption underneath PCV box. As you move the vacuum line down, simultaneously you can lift the PCV box and gently press it into the intake manifold, making sure not to damage the O-ring that seals it to the intake manifold. And also minding the lines from your coolant, that they bypass the PCV and that they don't get pinched, allowing there's enough room for this coolant line, the new one, and for the evap purge valve to clear in here if you're careful. Another connector to be mindful of in this process is the one for your flap runners on the driver's side. You also don't want this to get caught up in anything. Drop 10 intake manifold bolts into their positions with their washers and use your ratchet to just get them a little bit snug